All right, gearheads, welcome to Speed City. We just watched the Formula One Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Max Verstappen wins another. He's won the first two races of the season, but we saw Ollie Behrman, the rookie, in his first race ever with some points. This is John Massengale in the studio in Austin, joined by Jonathan Green here in Austin and Bob Varsha from Atlanta over Zoom. Jonathan, what'd you think, buddy?
Pretty impressive, no question about it. Very impressive for at Red Bull again, obviously. Actually, pleased for Perez because this is, what our complaint about Perez over the last couple of years and
P2
has been the fact that he hasn't been appearing in P2 and close enough to Verstappen, and that's 2 in a row now. So that helps the start of the year for a different year for Checo, but it's normal service resumed for
Yep, for Max
and for Max, and even if he threatens to leave the team as he has before the race, there's no distraction, is there?
Yeah, Bob Varsha, what do you think?
I enjoyed it thoroughly. I have to say, I love really fast racetracks like this, and Spa and Monza and Silverstone. What more could you ask for? We had a great story with the debutant Behrman coming in and being the 4th consecutive driver to make his Formula One debut in a Ferrari and score points. But the first one since Arturo Mazzario back in 1972, more from Max and Red Bull, and credit Sergio Perez, who was told he had to raise his game, and he appears to have done that, and he's still being self-critical, which is probably a good thing for a driver. That's a real burr under my saddle, so to speak, when I hear people talk about, well, Red Bull always wins. Well, yeah, and there's a reason for that. And it's because they're doing a superior job. And that's, what Formula One is all about. Great battles in there, considering where McLaren were last year, when I don't think they barely scored any points in the first 6 or 7 races of the season. And yet here they are doing really well to start off this season. Just a lot to talk about. That great dice at the end. Magnussen doing a great job holding up a train of 6 cars at one point to allow his teammate Nico Hülkenberg to go in, do a tire change, come back out, and still pick up a point for the team. Watching Alex Albon trying to fight his way out of that train of cars, and it was just good fun to watch.
I know there was tons to watch up and down. Alonso finishing 5th, and look at the HAAS cars. I got to check and see where Magnussen ultimately finished after his 2 10-second time penalties.
But Hülkenberg scored points.
He's going to be 17th. He's gone to the back, beating everybody but Zhou Guanyu, I believe. Excuse me.
Yeah. There's been a lot of discussion on social media about F1 is not as fun to watch because Max is winning. But if you know the sport, it is absolutely fantastic to watch. So, and this story with Ollie Behrman, I love it. I'm trying to remember back to the pre-show. Who predicted? Let's see.
I think it was
Casey, can you roll the tape?
No,
I'll go Verstappen, Alonso, Piastri, and I say that Behrman finishes finishes in the top 7. How about that? I'll go.
That would be stunning.
Yes. But so it's not such a bold prediction that everyone will remember it if I'm wrong, but if I'm right, everyone I'll get to play that clip. Okay.
So you're just you're deflecting here. So who predicted the top 3? Bob, do you know?
Hey, which was easier? Answer me that.
Bob, please stand up and stop this nonsense.
You Philistine.
There you go. Taking all the glory for 7.
Casey cut the clip. I had nothing to do.
That's a bunch of malarkey.
And I'll tell you this, Verstappen's going to win in Melbourne. Where's Behrman going to finish, Mr. Prognosticator?
Yeah. So just so we're clear, Bob Varsha did say Verstappen, Perez, Leclerc. So just so you know, fair's fair.
Yeah, so he predicted Red Bull 1-2 and then a Ferrari after that. Wow, that's hard.
My prediction was off the mark.
All in good fun.
Even a broken clock is right every now and then.
Yeah, now and again, yeah.
So.
Twice a day.
So let's just look at this because Piastri, in 4th with another outshining his teammate there. You know,
the one thing that, and the commentators were just saying at the end there, one of the big stories of this weekend and the last 2 weekends is McLaren's form compared to Mercedes. And if they keep this up, I think they're going to be better than Mercedes in the long run.
Yeah. Yeah. And thinking about this, at the beginning of the season, we thought, okay, it looks like Mercedes is going to make a big move this year, and maybe they're going to be a strong for second. And they're no further ahead than they were last year. In fact, towards the end of the season, they're behind that point. I mean, I know it's still early this season, but still. And it looks like Chris Medland just joined us. Mr. Medland, what'd you think of this race?
Great behind the front three, really, wasn't it? In terms of jeopardy and working out who was playing what game and whether it was going to get tight. In a sense, it never really did get tight. The Behrman fight with Norris and Hamilton, I was almost expecting more to come together with that. I should turn my video on, shouldn't I? There we go. I was expecting that to come to fruition. Tighter than it did. I thought McLaren would have the pace to get to Behrman, but cracking job he did. And then Kevin Magnussen. I mean, created enough drama for a couple of drivers with incidents, and then even more with the way he held them all off. It was, great result for HAAS. And I think a real, I mentioned it pre-race, didn't I, to keep an eye on how they did, and I was looking forward to seeing how they performed. Hulkenberg was just quick, and they had to make that strategy work. But as you've seen for Norris and Hamilton, it didn't really work very well, having not made the stop under the safety car. Mm-hmm. So to find a way to then make it work was great.
Mm-hmm.
Tell you what,
that's all part of the fun. Yeah.
I'll tell you what, they're 6th in the championship, HAAS, going into the next round in Australia, one of their best places for potential anyway over the years. I know it's only 1 point, but, when you look at those last four, Williams, Sauber, Ferrari, Honda, or RB and Alpine, they've got the jump at least. And if they could get another couple of points, it would bode well.
Well, what do you think the phone call to Gene is? Hey, Gene, we're in 6th place. It's been a while.
Yeah, we still look like wankers, though.
Yeah, well, ask Williams what it's like to score no points in a season. One is a big step from 0 when it comes to the Formula One World Championship.
Yep.
And it is a surprise to see me outperform
right now.
Sorry, Chris.
Sorry, Johnny. I was going to say, starting from a very small sample set right now, but everything we've seen suggests HAAS can target 6th this year.
Yeah.
Alpine is struggling. You'd imagine Alpine would have the development potential to maybe come back. That is something that HAAS has not had for a while. But where the car is right now, it's definitely in that mix to fight for that 6th place. I mean, if Magnussen had a clean race, maybe it would have been him getting the points. You're not too sure in that sense. So, it'll be really interesting to see how they kind of do in this first part of the season if they can pick up the points. But also, I just want to do a quick, it's not all doom and gloom thing. Ferrari, at this race last year, were nowhere. Nowhere near the podium, not competitive. Not a track they expected to be strong at all. They thought it would be quite a weak one for them. Back-to-back weekends when they've been 3rd and clearly the 2nd quickest car. But this was the track that it made more of a difference, I think. That's actually a fairly positive sign. I think there's going to be some circuits where Ferrari can get pretty close to Red Bull this year.
I like that.
I agree.
We're going to cut that clip out, Chris, because that's the money clip there. Everybody wants somebody to get competitive with Red Bull. Let's see.
Going back to HAAS, I mean, it's interesting to speculate about where Nico Hulkenberg would have qualified. If he hadn't lost the drive line in Q1.
Yeah, good point. Good point.
Yeah.
Albon
in Melbourne.
Albon finishing just
outside. True pace.
Yeah, Albon finishing just outside the points for Williams. Jonathan, you're talking about them not getting any points. They were just behind Hulkenberg there.
Yeah.
And we talked about Mercedes being slow, but what about Hamilton versus Russell? Hamilton has been slow all weekend, and the results show it. Russell finishing 6th, Hamilton in 9th.
Yeah, and he's been quicker in this car, in this new iteration 24 car than Hamilton has been in all of sessions so far. From what I've seen,
I think so. I think you're right, because remember last weekend he was Hamilton was saying, well, it was because I was doing high fuel loads, testing and qualifying, and then he didn't finish well. So, Chris, what do you think about what's going on with Hamilton?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because he has a very specific driving style. In terms of now, anyway, where he's comfortable, and he hasn't been comfortable with that Mercedes for a long time, basically this generation of car. And the thing was, last year, he didn't ever really look spectacular, did he? He had certain really strong races. He had the pole position in Hungary, but he was just consistent and kind of yeah, he was right in that mix. Ended up obviously third in the championship at one point, looking like he could have got himself second with Perez. He was putting a bit of pressure on towards the end of the season. So I don't think it's been terrible for him by any stretch. And I think this could be one where they've actually got a car that he's going to be happier with, but that Russell definitely is a lot happier with and has kind of hit the ground running a little bit. But I mean, a day like today, they split the strategies, Mercedes. They actually sent a good explainer around to a few of us after the race to kind of explain what they did. And they offset the strategies at the safety car because they didn't know how the race was going to unfold. And it turned out that the medium soft was an option because the medium was a good tyre. But just getting caught up behind Norris meant that they couldn't make any further progress with Hamilton. But essentially, they were onto a loser with that strategy because of the way the field had bunched up. So if you switch that round, I think, and Hamilton's the one who pits, Russell stays out and does the medium soft approach, I think Hamilton finishes ahead of him. I think today's a strategy kind of result.
Okay.
But it would be interesting to see by the time we get to the summer, whether Hamilton has found a driving style that works, which the best drivers tend to do, they adapt, or if Russell stayed ahead of him. And that would be quite a telling sign, I think, if Russell can kind of keep a little bit of a margin there.
All right, guys, let's open up the phone lines and the text lines because we want to get your input. We're getting all of ours. How about yours? The phone number, 512-643-5483, 512-643-LIVE. And you can also text to that same phone number, and we'll get those messages. But, yeah, give us a call and let us know what you think. What other stories, Jonathan, that are jumping out at you?
I'm just looking at the Drivers' Championship, and, that story of Hamilton versus Russell is very clear, with Russell 4th on 18 points, Hamilton 9th, just 2 points ahead of Ollie Beerman, currently, who scored 6. That kind of puts it in the... Yeah, but a bit of context, but it's so early days, we can't judge anything. But
yeah. Following up on Chris's point about Hamilton, conspiracy theory alert. I wonder how much Lewis, who said this year's car was improved, but I thought he was kind of guarded in his comments, which is quite natural with a new car. I wonder if he drove that car and thought about it, and it contributed in some way to his decision to head for Ferrari next year.
Very interesting.
I think that deal had been done long before he got to drive this one, though, hadn't it?
That's what I think
last year.
Yeah.
Last year would have been frustrating because he felt Mercedes didn't listen to him with what he wanted from last year's car. And then the second year of struggle really upset him because he'd said what he felt they needed to be doing. And then obviously the contract situation where Mercedes wouldn't offer him the length of deal he wanted either. For someone who'd had such success there, he felt he deserved more than that and wanted more than that. And Ferrari offered it. So I don't think it was the car in that sense. I think it won't have hurt now if he isn't happy with the car. He'll be even more confident in his decision. But everything he said about the car, actually, until really, I guess, qualifying, or maybe not qualifying here, but he did talk a bit about in practice, the rear end being unstable in terms of the setup. They haven't got it right in Jeddah. But in Bahrain, even though he was getting beaten by George, he was saying much happier. The car's in a much better place. This is a great place to start from. And he was very positive. So maybe he's just able to have that outlook now he knows he's leaving. And he's not going to throw his toys out the pram over it. But it seems, if we take it at face value, that he is actually happier with this car. It's just that, as we've seen, Ferrari and McLaren have also made decent steps. McLaren are an interesting one because they say they've got a lot more to come still.
No question about this next question. Who do y'all think was driver of the day?
Has to be Ollie Beerman, yep.
Yeah, and
by a huge margin. I think he had 49% of the vote when they broadcast it on television. And so, yeah, he crushed it.
Just watching his first lap was pretty impressive against Yuki.
Yeah.
Hey, we have a question.
He was not timid, was he? Yeah, that was fair. That was massively impressive because obviously it can all go wrong at that time. And he's still learning how the car reacts on full fuel with those tyres in so much traffic and dirty air and the impact of that. And as we mentioned on the pre-race show, the performance difference between an F2 car and F1 car is something like 14 seconds around that circuit. Totally different category, literally, but also, you have to recalibrate everything in terms of braking zones and all those markers you have, your turning points, when you can pick up the throttle, all of that stuff. And he's kind of doing that on the fly. So I thought the opening few laps would be stay out of trouble, take it easy, be careful. But they went with the aggressive strategy, starting on the softs, so he had to make moves.
Yeah.
And he went for it. He didn't find his way past Yuki, but he did go for it. Very impressive.
Mm-hmm.
Chris, well, before you jumped on, when we first started, Jonathan talked about that this was a really great race for Sergio Perez because he's got this Red Bull car. He needs more P2s.
Yeah, absolutely. He's doing exactly what you'd expect. And he kind of kept Max generally honest, and he kind of 7-8 seconds was the gap, and he kept it there. He'd obviously dropped back a bit with the way the start had played out, but also just getting shuffled back in that pit stop phase. And then he got his time penalty. So if you look at the final result now, it looks bigger than it really was on the road.
Mm-hmm.
But it's an encouraging enough start for Checo, but we saw last year that he could have a strong start with a new car, feel fairly comfortable. And what Max does is susses it out and then finds a way of getting even more out of it. So that will be the acid test for Perez, is going to be, can he go with Verstappen if there's more to come from Verstappen in this car? Can he adapt and improve with this car as the year goes on? Or does it go away from him again?
Yeah. Yep. I mean, look, my point is just that I feel like he's just underperforming in general. Now today, no, that's where he needs to be. So I don't know. Maybe I'm putting too much into that, but I just was thinking that. But what about Leclerc's race, Jonathan? Finishing P3?
I mean, Leclerc is anything but consistent. I mean, front row start, missing out on qualifying yet again, missing out on pole yet again, but by inches. And, he's not making mistakes. I don't know, again, we're too early in the season to judge, but that Ferrari does look capable, and we said it, and all the commentators said it, of beating on its day Red Bull. And that's a much better statement than we could make last year, where we never really saw light at the end of the tunnel for Ferrari. And I do think that what we've seen in this last 2 weeks gives us that light.
Chris?
Now, I hate to do this. But have we said congratulations to Mr. John Massengale for his pre-race prediction that Ollie Behrman was going to finish 7th?
Well, you missed. You weren't on when we played it, but we can play it again. I'm sure John will allow the time.
Because we just spoken about him, and I apologize for being late. I have to do the bulletin for the SiriusXM network, so that's why I'm always late to the post-race shows. But yeah, I just looked at my notes and went, oh.
Don't worry, he's rammed it down our throats already.
All right, well, I'm so humbled that I'm going to go to break so we don't have to talk about this anymore. You're listening to Speed City. We'll be back after these messages. Yeah, Chris, we even played the clip. It was really rude. Let's see what we got going on. Man, we got lots of comments on the YouTube. Oh, this is a good one. Andy P. right off the top. Ollie Behrman's neck feels absolutely no pain right now. Great job. Did he say that, I guess? That's pretty cool.
He's 18. He doesn't feel anything.
Well, that's true. He's 18.
Yeah, Jack Aitken was on the audio track saying, I bet he's a bit wobbly right now. I'd love to know the truth of that.
Yeah.
Because remember, he had them take out some of the side bolsters in the cockpit so he could see the corners better. And I was watching every time we saw Behrman late in the race. I kept watching his helmet to see if he was starting to do this.
You see,
if his neck muscles gave out at all.
You see, you're always quoting Dave Lawrence, but you never quote Logan Robinson, do you?
What?
Why is Johnny Green so ridiculously good looking? You see, there is an F1 man who knows his stuff.
Is that your mom's?
No, okay, no, true. To be fair, Logan's a mate of mine, so
there we go.
I think he's tinkering with us all. Although Dave Lawrence does say Merck will be back on the podium by June.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, you can definitely.
Thanks, Logan.
It's still
back at you, buddy.
There's a lot of teams starting in a better place, aren't there? So it's going to be quite a good fight at some races, I think, behind Red Bull, and sometimes with them, maybe. It's going to be very tough to see anyone really stretch it into any sort of regular fight.
That's why testing is so interesting. I mean, they tested the proposed tires that Pirelli was going to bring out for this season last summer, but you come for 3 days of testing, assuming you get maximum time on those 3 days. You got to suss out your new car and all the new technology and the tires that you're going to be running. I mean, there is so much that has to happen in testing. I would love to see
here we go. Coming back.
A documentary about that.
Hi, this is Karun Chandok, and you're listening to Speed City.
Welcome back to the fastest hour in radio.
Speed City.
All right, gearheads, welcome to the show. Watched the Formula One Saudi Arabian Grand Prix where Max Verstappen wins, followed by Checo Perez, Charles Leclerc. Yeah. And a fantastic race for the rookie in his first race ever, Ollie Beerman, finishing 7th as predicted. But yeah, we really enjoyed the race. I know it's Max Verstappen out front all the way, but man, there was plenty to talk about, and we're going to get into all that. I'm going to give out the phone number in case you want to join us. Phone number is 512-643-5483, and you can also text us at 512-643-LIVE.
Last I'll say on the matter, but it just proves how strong that Red Bull team is and how strong Max is when all around that maelstrom around the team could have destroyed another team.
Yeah, good point. There's the maelstrom of Horner and all of that. So, but yeah, there's plenty to talk about. A great race, and from behind the Max, plenty. I say great race because there was, from a competitive standpoint, but there was so much going on with the Haas team.
I think the circuit played a lot to do with that. We said at the beginning, we like this circuit. It's super quick.
Well, and this is why what Ollie Beerman did is so phenomenal. It's his first race ever. He's only 18. He's in the pressure cooker Ferrari, and he's at this racetrack with walls looming all around him.
Yeah, Anthony Davison said this would, of all the tracks that you could think of as a baptism of fire. At least Lawson had Suzuka in his pocket and then went to Singapore, places that, that there's plenty of sim work on. But this is a really tough track.
Yeah.
This or Baku,
I'm just looking as well at what Behrman did in terms of fastest lap. Like, he had to find a way of keeping Lando Norris and Lewis Hamilton behind him as they were closing in, manage the fitness, as we've said. And his fastest lap was on the final lap of the race, like a number of drivers were. But it was quicker than George Russell. It was quicker than Fernando Alonso. It was quicker than Oscar Piastri. And it was quicker than Sergio Perez.
That's wild.
There were hardly any drivers. There's Norris and Hamilton with their soft tyres late on. And then Verstappen and Leclerc. They're the only drivers to do a faster lap than Behrman managed, which he did on the final lap of the race.
I think being faster than Checo.
As the race went on, he started to, when he thought he had a shot at catching who would it have been, Norris, he was back on it, and that was impressive. And he had a very, very mediocre pit stop because he got stuck with all those cars coming down the pit lane under the safety car. They had to hold him for more than 5 seconds waiting to get back out in the queue.
Yeah. Well, that was Bob Varsha and Chris Medland. Jonathan Green here is with us, and this is John Massengale. But, Jonathan, what else grabbed your attention that we haven't talked about yet? Just looking down this, right? The Piastri and the McLaren finishing 4th. Impressive again, but go ahead.
I think if I'm looking at this microcosm of two very different circuits, maybe we should take this judgment after Australia because it is, again, another very different circuit. But I would say that it bodes well for all of us watching on. When you look at how doom and gloom Mercedes were this time last year, same with McLaren, compared this year, Ferrari are in the hunt. Red Bull are the team to beat still, but we didn't expect anything different. But I do think that McLaren and Mercedes are going to have an almighty battle with Ferrari for that second place. If not, actually take it to Red Bull.
Mr. Varsha, what do you think?
Well, I'm also thinking about Aston Martin in all of this.
Yep.
Fernando Alonso had another race. He had a plan. He was going to lay back and charge at the end. Didn't quite work out, but I think better than it did in Bahrain last week. And poor Lance Stroll, put it in the barrier after touching the wall on the left for the second time this weekend, which broke his left front, and he had no steering and no braking and had a big one that fortunately he walked away from. But I think Aston, if they get their act together and they get a little more support from Stroll, they're going to be in the middle of a terrific fight, not only for second, but third, fourth, and so on. And now, and you think about Haas, I think this was a great weekend for them in so many ways. I thought when Kevin Magnussen went off track, passing the RB, came back on, and every driver knows I've got to give that position back, but he didn't do it. That tells me they had a strategy in place early on. It's like, do whatever you have to do to get in front of, I think it was Sonoda at the time, and hold him up so that Nico, who's ahead of you on the road, Nico Hulkenberg, can open up the gap, get in, get a pit stop, and salvage some points for the team. I'd love to know that backstory from Ayo Komatsu and the rest of the team, because I thought they just performed really brilliantly.
Yeah, I agree.
Now, speaking of that, David Lawrence tweeted at us.
Uh-oh.
He said, John Elkann, going to be, CEO of Stellantis, et cetera, says, going to be making a call to Gene Haas and Ayo Komatsu about a 2025 seat for a certain Brit after watching Ollie Behrman. What do y'all think? He says.
That's what I jokingly said to you.
You said it to me during the race. Yeah.
That'll be the next
What do you think, Chris?
To be honest, and I don't want to do like obviously, but if you'd asked me this question 2-3 months ago, I'd have told you Behrman's driving a Haas in 2025, even before he got this chance. The 6 FP1s he's lined up for already tell you all you need to know. Hulkenberg and Magnussen are exactly what Haas needed for the last 2 years, but there's so much movement in the driver market. I think both will be trying to put themselves in a shop window. And I think, let's be honest, so far over the last 18 months, Hulkenberg's probably the one who thinks he might be able to get a move elsewhere of the two. And I think that as part of that Ferrari partnership, it was really ramping up that Behrman was being prepared for that seat anyway. I think today has just meant that if Haas had any reservations about putting a rookie in, they know that the potential he's got and the talent he's got. It will be a bit of a shock, I think, for Behrman if his next race start in Formula One is in a Haas. And he's had that excitement of doing it in a Ferrari, and then it's going to be a very different experience. But again, that's all great experience for him too. And as we saw with Ferrari and Charles Leclerc, like they've moved drivers up quickly as well if they've done the job. Now, Leclerc and Hamilton will form a partnership for a while there, but Behrman's going to have every opportunity to prove that he is worthy of a future Ferrari seat too. And he could be, 21, 22, with a few years under his belt at Haas and then going into a Ferrari. So
in place of Hamilton who retire,
it's just reaffirms that plan, I think. But I don't think it's really changed anything.
Does Sauber fit into that equation in any way? Yeah, they're going to be Audi in 2026. But in the meantime, Nico Hulkenberg has got to be eyeing one of those Audi seats. He's German. They're German. Even if Sainz goes there, which a lot of people are thinking there might, Haas is an option. But I think 1 year maybe with the Sauber team is a possibility too, depending on how he develops.
I'd like to go on, Chris.
I was going to say, I think that would have been, 2025 would have been the only year that could have happened. But the fact that he is a Haas reserve and doing 6 FP1s for Haas, you're prepping him for that seat. I can't see it being any other than that seat. Now, maybe if for some reason Haas say no, that they don't want to, they get another option, whatever it may be, then you might try last minute to make that other move happen. But I mean, we're also getting massively ahead of ourselves in the sense of we don't know what will happen with Sainz in Melbourne, and maybe Behrman gets another chance and doesn't do so well. We don't know how his F2 season goes, and if they then go, actually, look, he's still only 18, great first sign, but we're gonna slow this down and give him a third season in F2, or give him a whole year doing more practice sessions. Who knows? But yeah, right now, if you ask me to kind of pencil him in somewhere, I've got him driving fast next year.
Well, that's what y'all told me a while ago when I was predicting how good Ollie Behrman is.
It's part of our mission statement. We have to get way out over our skis. That's what we do.
Exactly.
The other story in the background bubbling along that I wanted to draw people's attention to. We talked about Aston Martin and how quickly they're going forward. I think the movement of their new executive director of technical, Bob Bell, from the aforementioned sinking ship that is Alpine, is a big move. He's worked for a lot of key teams and he's well respected. And it's just another brick of Alonso's group of people that he's brought from Alpine. And I think it's another, I don't know what Chris reckons, but Bob Bell is another good acquisition for Aston.
Yeah, certainly. I think it's strengthening that team with good experience. Partly as well, if you've got someone then who can look at what another rival team was doing and maybe even doing wrong. But, we saw Pat Fry make the same move to Williams and got all these ideas that they want to implement that maybe were not being allowed to happen at Alpine. So I think that's a really good move in that sense. It remains to be seen quite how, because he was in an advisory role at Alpine.
Okay.
So Bell wasn't quite so hands-on, it seemed, any longer. So he's coming back into it with Aston, but I think it's the sort of thing that Aston do need. They've got to be careful not to have too many cooks because they're investing heavily. There's a lot of opportunities for change and choosing directions. And if you get a load of new people in at once and then they're all coming up with their own ideas, like who are you going to follow? But I'm kind of seeing Bell actually taking that position there from a technical point of view, just overseeing it all and going, I hear you all. I see what you want. This is the direction we're going to head in, which I think could be really, really steadying for that team. But as you mentioned, Alonso there, it does fit in with, that's someone that Alonso won championships with at Renault. But Alonso said he's going to make a decision early this year, like as early as possible, about his future, so that Aston Martin know what they're dealing with, whether they need to go and look at anyone else or whether they've signed him up, that sort of thing. And I find that quite strange, actually, because Alonso has also spoken about how he knows he's so key to the driver market. He's he's a double world champion who is available and is clearly, as we've seen today again, performing at the very highest level.
Isn't he just being the cunning fox?
Unless he's trying to force, maybe he's trying to force Mercedes to do something and say, we want you, or yes or no. I'm not totally sure on that front, but if I was him, I'd be saying I'm going to, play this out right to the very end and get a bidding war for my services between Aston and Mercedes and anyone else who might want me.
When in doubt, just go err on the side that Alonso's being cunning. That's the way I would think about that. I just think he's doing what you're saying, Jonathan.
He's swallowing Viagra and as potent as ever.
Yeah. And Jonathan, you said all these people are following Alonso to Aston Martin. Are they going to follow him to Mercedes?
But joking aside, we talked about it with, how Schumacher in the day at Ferrari built a team around him of people that had worked with him before, and Ross Brawn, John Barnard, etc., Rory Byrne, and that's what I meant. We talked about it the other week, that Alonso has got, he took Pedro de la Rosa there. He can kind of, with the help of Mr. Stroll, handpick some of the people that he thinks are capable of putting a championship together.
Yeah, and Mr. Stroll is clearly doing something right. I mean, look how good Aston Martin is looking right now. We wouldn't have believed this 2 years ago.
No.
I mean, even last year, you were thinking, when is this? Are we going to go back to reality where, I know they slowed a little bit at the end of the year, but here they are coming up at the beginning of this year looking great.
Yeah.
And there'll be a Honda team in 2006.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, very true. That's I'm actually going to just check the gap that Alonso was behind in Jeddah a year ago, because
good one.
His finishing position isn't so good right now compared to a year ago. But in terms of actually where he was classified, he finished 20 seconds behind Perez. So Verstappen obviously had to come through the field. So 20 seconds behind Perez, who realistically in a clean race would have been second to Verstappen last year. This year, he finished 22 seconds behind Perez. And that was 35 behind Max. But it kind of shows that Aston are holding their own there. It's just that others have kind of moved around them and stepped forward again when they'd had bad starts. But, a lot of people were saying, well, we got a question, didn't we? Caller last week saying, should Aston Martin be worried, or are the drivers going to be worried about this start to the season? And they're like, no, we've actually, our trajectory is still good. It's just that others are more up and down around us.
And if Stroll gets an appendix, you never know. Crawford could get the call up.
We'll have to find out. That's going to be the next bit of digging I do. I'm going to go around the paddock in Albert Park when I get to Melbourne. And I'm going to go, how many of you have had your appendix out? So who's under threat?
All right, hand them all in. I want to see them.
So Lando Norris got asked yesterday, I think seriously as well by a journalist, whether the new generation of cars and the porpoising and bouncing could have been a cause for appendicitis. And therefore the drivers are more susceptible to it now. And he laughed it off. It was like, no. And then he Googled it and he said 1 in 13 people get it. So by those odds, we've kind of had our average ticked off. We've had 2 drivers out of 20. But you never know. There could be a few more that are still susceptible to it.
Yeah. Did the stats show the frequency in F1 drivers? We don't know that stat. Hey, we got a really good text from Harry in Virginia. Many thanks to the entire Speed City crew for the great coverage. Thumbs way up for everyone. Ollie drove his ass off today and earned many new fans today, myself included, he says. Thanks, Harry. We appreciate you listening. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll continue our breakdown of the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix and much more. Back after this. All right, there's no way I'm going to be able to catch up with all this.
Where are you getting these texts?
Casey sent them to me. I guess they're coming into the main switchboard.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can see it on the chat.
Yeah, they're in the chat, Jeannie? Jeannie Greenie?
I dream of Jeannie.
Here's a stat from Sean Kelly.
Yeah.
That's pretty telling. Verstappen has now led the Drivers' Championship for a greater percentage of his career than did Ayrton Senna.
Wow.
He's led for almost a third of his career. He won in the World Championship.
Jeez.
Yeah, his stats are pretty phenomenal, aren't they?
Huh.
Yeah.
It's reliability that kills it, isn't it? Because you watch that race and you didn't think, oh, what if Verstappen has a problem? Because you know that no car really has a problem anymore. I mean, Gasly did, but it's so rare. That Gasly one was the first retirement of the season, and Stroll adds it with the second one with a driver error, and that's it.
Should we give Brawn that credit? I mean, in terms of devising the rules and.
I actually think it's a negative byproduct of trying to keep the field close by freezing certain things.
Okay.
It means that all they can work on is reliability and not push performance to the limit like they used to in really tight battles.
Okay.
And I'd like to see a return to being able to push the power units harder and develop them more. Maybe from 26, that is what's going to happen with the new ones.
We want to see Mansell
I think
walking over the line with a broken back more often.
It's just you just need the jeopardy though, don't you? You just need that you might get a message from anyone that you've got to watch the end just in case someone has a problem. Because if there's not going to be any problems, then you genuinely can almost switch off 20 laps in.
Coming back.
Hello to everyone, this is Gunther Steiner, this is Speed City.
Welcome back to the fastest hour in radio, Speed City.
CrowdStrike presents Driven in 60. As the official cybersecurity partner of the Mercedes-AMG Petronas Formula One team, CrowdStrike protects against cyber threats so the team can focus on what matters, their next win. The revolutionary cloud-native unified CrowdStrike Falcon platform harnesses the speed and power of the cloud to protect and defend organizations of all sizes against increasingly complex threats, stopping breaches before they happen. Because on and off the track, the stakes could not be higher. A split-second difference can make the difference between victory and defeat. When every second counts, protection shouldn't slow you down. It should fuel your momentum. CrowdStrike, protection at every turn. To learn more and to try CrowdStrike Falcon free today, visit crowdstrike.com/XM. All right, gentlemen. Let's see. Where were we a while ago when we took a break? I'm just looking out on Twitter and see what the chatter was. And the chatter's mostly about Ollie Behrman. Yeah. And I guess that is well-deserved.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
although Chris raised an interesting point when we were in break, and the folks out there on YouTube heard it, attrition is so much less a factor than it once was. I mean, if Lance Stroll doesn't clip the wall and stick it in the fence, you'd have had one car out of that race, and that would have been the first one of the 2024 season. I think I've told the story before. I wrote a small book with the late Dan Gurney about his 67 Spa winning Gurney Eagle Westlake, and I was compiling the results of Dan's career in Formula One. And back then in the late 50s, early 60s, you'd lose half the field in a race just due to attrition, just, breakdowns.
Yeah.
If you had 18 cars in a race, maybe 9, 10 would finish, which is probably why they only give out points to the top 6 in the race, because you weren't assured you'd have more cars than that finish.
Yeah, and that's so true. I mean, even just a couple of years ago. Go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say, part of it obviously comes down to the rules have been written to try and close the field up. We've got very restrictive aerodynamic rules to try and keep them close and let them race more closely. And it's worked with everyone pretty much but Red Bull. And then they froze the power units so that everyone wouldn't end up in a huge spending war before 2026. But by freezing the power units, they said all you can do is do reliability work, which means they get more and more reliable. And I feel like it's a balancing act, but it's probably better to have a greater chance of 20 cars all finishing the race and all close on performance, and we're seeing the drivers make the difference, than it is to have 12 cars finishing the race, a huge field spread, but you don't know which ones are actually going to see the end, because you might have the best driver doing a brilliant job, but then their car lets them down. And it's the lack of jeopardy, I don't think, is great for individual races. But I think you've kind of got to pick one or the other, and I think they probably picked the right one of the two. It's just a bit of a shame that it does mean you don't have that. I must watch to the final corner of the final lap in case something goes wrong for a car, which we used to have in the past. That I think just helped F1 a little bit.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it also brings up the fact that these teams and engineers and designers and whatnot are capable of so much more if they factor in that jeopardy. You know, they used to be running on the ragged edge, and they were backing it down a little bit. The cars became heavier and so on because of the performance factors built into them that would reduce that attrition and hopefully allow them to race closer together. But it's something the rules makers have to be very careful about when they lay out the technical regs.
Well, something you said, Bob, in the break there about a stat from Virtual Statman, Sean Kelly, about Max Verstappen having now nearly led a third of his career, as in led the championship for nearly a third of his career, and more time than Ayrton Senna managed.
That's right. He has just passed Senna.
It's a stunning stat, but at the same time, it's kind of apples and pears, isn't it? Because Senna was racing in an era where he might have been just as dominant performance-wise, but his machinery might let him down more often. So you can't give the drivers the exact same comparison in that sense. And that's always something to remember when people say how hard it is to pick who's the best and that sort of thing. What we really want, though, and that's what they've done with these rules, is the opportunity to see the best fight it out on track as much as possible. So in that sense, reliability improving is better. I mean, anyone who's driven a rental go-kart, for example, you go with your friends to a rental kart facility. If you paid some money and you're racing and you're having fun, and then your kart lets you down, you don't go, the drama of this, isn't that exciting? You get really annoyed. So
yeah, absolutely. Right. Yeah. Mechanical empathy used to be a real, arrow in a driver's quiver. And some drivers were much better at it than others. But now it's not as big a factor anymore, for sure.
We're giving Sean Kelly the Virtual Statman, way too much airtime. But he has another really good tweet here. He says, I don't know if this is the right time to bring it up, but Ollie Behrman is now officially last in the Formula 2 Drivers' Championship, and he lost 2 points for pole position. He says, tough weekend for the lad.
Yeah, we talked about that in our pre-race show. I mean, in order to put his stamp on a Formula 1 ride, presumably in Melbourne in 2 weeks, if Carlos Sainz can't go again, he's made the decision he's going to destroy his chance of a Formula 2 championship.
Oh, speaking of Formula 2, by the way, for anyone who was listening to the pre-race show, Dennis Hauger kept his third place, so Jack Crawford stayed fourth in the standings from today. But in F1 Academy, Doriane Pin has just been announced, or 20 minutes ago, that she was given a 20-second time penalty for taking the checkered flag twice. She won the second Formula 1 Academy race, and then did another lap at racing speed, didn't realise the race was over, and has lost the win. So
I guess because that's dangerous driving at that speed after the checkered flag, right?
So did you get out of the car and punch her engineer?
Well, so I think she had reason to, because she missed the checkered flag. It was definitely waving,
and she couldn't.
But then there was nothing else to signal the end of the race beyond that point. And her engineer didn't tell her on the radio. And it seemed they all took off their headsets and were celebrating in the pit lane. I haven't confirmed that's exactly what happened, but the pictures showed that. So when she sent a radio message checking something halfway around the lap, she didn't get a reply. And then when she finished the next lap, probably just being safe to make sure the race was over, she then got a message from the engineer being like, what the hell are you doing? Like, the race is finished. And she's like, you didn't tell me. So I actually think it wasn't on her.
I'm still racing.
Well, maybe not. And if I remember correctly, you know who was waving the checkered flag? Susie Wolf.
That was only race one. So race
only
two wasn't.
One?
It was one of, race two was one of the female senior members of the Saudi Motorsport Federation.
It wasn't Jerry Halliwell.
Then. Forgive me for not remembering her name off the top of my head, but So and she did it fine. I even rewound the race to check as they crossed the line. The flag's there, you can see it. So it was just Pan missed it.
Where does that put her in race two then?
A long way back, I think. Actually, 20 seconds. I didn't need to check the final results of that. I'll do that while Bob chats.
Well, I was going to make the point that time and again we see these situations where they put a celebrity out there to wave the checkered flag, and
they don't know how to do it.
They don't know what they're doing. And we had that time with Pelé, who waved it early, I think, in Brazil. Giselle,
he got the rebound though.
Tom Brady's ex.
He didn't
remember when the head of Apple or Microsoft was waving it in Austin, and he gave it one of these kinds of things.
Yeah, slow motion. I remember that.
And it was, it seems to come a cropper more often than not when you get a celebrity out there. Let a professional flagman handle that and be done with it.
Hey, I got another stat for you guys. We know that this was the 100th podium.
This isn't the Sultan of Shrewsbury again, is it?
No, it's not. It may. Who knows? It may have originated with him. But at the 100th podium for Verstappen, how many of those do you think are wins? Do you remember the stat earlier?
Over half, I would say.
56.
There you go.
56.
Well, I was going to say, we know he's got 56 wins.
Well, I didn't know if you remembered it, but 56 out of 100. That's insane,
wild.
Insane stat.
56.
Yeah.
And out of the last 2 years, like how many we go back to is just enormous, isn't it? That he's got from the start of 22.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Race 4 of 22 onwards. It's going to be all but 4, I want to say.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think Karun Shandok described Max as metronomic, which is pretty much says it all.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah. I'll just, I will flag, it was that penalty for Doriane Pin has dropped her to 9th in the result today.
Oh,
takes her right out of it. So it means that Abby Pulling wins. Maya Vug, I think is how you say her name, from Ferrari,
the Ferrari driver,
second. And Nerea Marti for Tommy Hilfiger goes up to 3rd. And Chloe Chambers gets a point in 10th.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that earlier. Yeah. We talked about her in the pre-show. She's doing great. She's
got the story of the Academy, though, is
Marta Garcia is not in the championship this year, I think, is she?
No.
Correct, yeah. You're not allowed to stay in it if you win, as far as I'm aware. But if you finish, you can only do 2 years in total anyway. And you can't stay in it if you win it.
I see.
Talking of women, shout out to Chadwick. Just got 5th fastest in practice in Indy Next today.
That's impressive, for sure.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
No, it's going to be interesting watching
Saturday morning, I think.
I'm going to throw that stat back at you all that we were just trying to work out. So out of, let's go from the start of 2022.
Yeah.
So there has been, in that time, 46 races. How many of those has been won by Max Verstappen?
25.
So all of 22, 23.
No, it's got to be more than that. I'd say 35.
I was going to say.
It's got to be more than that. Because he reset the record for season wins, I think. In 22, it was like 15. Then 23, of course, he got 19. Somebody do the math for me. So 30,
it's
32,
38.
I'm guessing. No, 15 and 19 be 34.
I said 35.
More.
Whoa.
Really?
You're kind of forgetting the 2 he's just won this season. So 36.
Oh, that's true. That's
Yeah.
true.
36. Wow.
44.
Good guess,
36 out of 46.
I was only one off.
Yeah. That was just your.
Nobody
instinct.
plays my bat. Nobody runs back and plays my
well,
bits.
You missed it by 1. You
Okay,
got
yeah.
it
Are you
right.
cheating?
We paused the
Are
show.
you cheating,
and
Medland? Are
replay
you using actual facts? Come on. This is an
Yeah.
opinion.
Sorry.
the heck?
Sorry.
We choose truth over facts.
All right, we're going to go ahead and take a break, and when we'll be back after these messages. All right, we're still live on YouTube.
David Lawrence says Jamie Chadwick will be an Indy Next winner this season, and I'd love that to happen.
That would be amazing. Yeah.
To be honest, I was about to say the Academy story for me was Leia Block. I mean, amazing.
Hey, Jonathan, did you wish your uncle a happy birthday today?
I didn't. I saw it come up, 87 today. But if not, I will. I'll go back and make sure my dad gives him a call. My dad being 88, a year older than Brian, which is hilarious. But yep,
Brian's
still going
still-
strong.
They're back in the old country?
No, I think no. Brian's at home. I think
He's in
just
Florida,
done,
isn't he?
Yeah, he's just done Amelia Islander, so he should be.
Where shirts are optional in Florida.
Yeah.
We're talking about
Well,
Brian
not
Redmond.
at Amelia, I can tell you that.
Let's see who else.
It's funny, Brian Redmond was another guy that was a bit like did a few Ollie Behrmans, had to come in and replace drivers. I think he replaced Ronnie Peterson, sadly, when he lost his life, and I think he came in for UOP Shadow just at a moment's notice, and donned on a Formula helmet.
Wesman and Kevin Kelly are having a conversation. What do you do on YouTube? Kevin Kelly says, Wesman, thanks for what you do on YouTube. And Wesman says, thank you, you're welcome. I don't know, is he just talking about the comments? But anyway, let us know. Let us know what you do out
Having
there.
a private conversation on our YouTube
on
channel.
our YouTube channel.
No, that's what it's all about, man.
That's exactly it.
We're building a community, millions at a time, or at least ones or tens at a time.
Yeah, that's a rough estimate.
Chris, is it weird being at home or just kind of fantastic?
Both, because right now it's weird. I wish I was being able to, when you say you'd love to hear what Komatsu made of today's race and the way they went
you'd have
about
got that.
it. I'd love to be running down there to find out. Yeah, that's a lot more fun. But at the same time, it's great to know that when I'm off this and I get my writing done, I can just
here we go.
Hello, I'm Jenny Gow from BBC F1. You are listening to Speed City.
Welcome back to the fastest hour in radio, Speed City.
The Speed City F1 post-race show on SiriusXM is brought to you by CrowdStrike. Stop today's most sophisticated cyber attacks at the office, the racetrack, and everywhere in between. Learn more at crowdstrike.com/XM. Don't forget the /XM. And we got 2 more segments. You want to give us a call? 512-643-5483. 512-643-LIVE. You can also text that same number. Love to see a text or a phone call from you. See what you think of this race, this season, anything to do with Formula One or motorsports for that matter. Why not? All right, gentlemen, what are we going to talk about next? Greenie, what else?
Let's
jumping out at you today.
Let's talk about the season ahead. I mean, we've got, it's gonna come fast and furious. 24 races. I do predict a record, and I do predict that it will be. I think we've seen it now. The ingredients are there for a much tighter, more competitive, and more unusual season than last year.
Chris Medland, what do you say to that?
I agree with that. I was maybe a bit overambitious on a few preseason things where I said we'd have 4 different teams winning races this year. I think that's what I said.
I don't know.
You can kind of see it at different times. You can kind of see where a McLaren might suddenly be right there with the Red Bull again. They don't have to wait till halfway through the season to make a step to be somewhere close. Mercedes is a question mark. Although they did say, their big weakness is high speed, and that's what they're going to work on over the next 2 weeks before Melbourne, because everywhere else actually feel quite strong. But then, Ferrari, I think, is starting in a much better place. And there's a momentum behind Ferrari. I mean, we've been talking about Behrman and what he's done this weekend, but Leclerc had a very solid drive to third. Would have been probably in that fight for third as well last week if he didn't have his braking issue. But this team looks like it's just been improving and improving since just after the summer break last year. I think they said Zandvoort, they kind of sussed things out. And under Varsha, it does seem to just be calmer. We don't see strategic errors. They got everything right today in terms of the strategy as well, when it could have got a bit hectic, or they could have done something a bit silly with the curveball of a rookie driver in there. And it just feels like a team that has started building momentum, and it's not had a blip for a while. And the longer the momentum builds, the more you start to believe, okay, Ferrari is getting stronger and could take the fight to Red Bull sometimes.
Yep, I agree.
Varsha, what do you say to all that?
I'm sorry, I'm spinning through Sean Kelly's stats here.
You're trying to show us all up.
A Brit. He's always attuned to what British drivers are doing. No offense, Chris.
Those damn Brits.
It took me a time to figure out these 2 points he makes. One is the last time 4 British drivers scored points in the same race was 1968 in the French Grand Prix. John Surtees, Jackie Stewart, Vic Elford, and Piers Courage. Next point. The last time 4 British drivers finished in the top 10, regardless of point system, was the Suzuka, the Japanese Grand Prix in 2000. David Coulthard, Jenson Button, Johnny Herbert, and Eddie Irvine. I mean, that's like a walk down memory lane. Keep in mind, those four British drivers in 68, that was 6 points, 6 places worth of points only. So 4 of the top 6 were Brits. So,
wow.
Go ahead and crow, Chris.
Only George would have got a point in that old format, wouldn't he, today? The other 3 would have been talking about how gutting it was for them and that he came so close to points and didn't get any, which I think it's better that we do the points this way. But something else I wanted to bring up, because it's been flagged up by something Christian Horner said actually on TV. But also with that win, Red Bull have now moved ahead of Williams on the all-time winners list in Formula One.
Wow.
With 115 wins to 114. And they're only 10 behind Mercedes with 125. So you can absolutely see that by the end of this season, Red Bull that is in its 20th season. So, realistically, it's not been around very long.
Yeah.
It'd be the third most successful constructor of all time. And then you've got McLaren on 183 and Ferrari on 243. So it's going to take forever to get to either of those two. But yeah, it's a remarkable run that they're on.
Hey, how about a Haas, back to Haas F1 pivot? I'm just looking at the Haas Twitter/X account, whatever you call it, and looks like a very happy team. And I'm just noticing they're showing the garage in there, and it looks like a happy team and a unified team. They've probably had a lot of all this uncertainty. All of us, they were predicting they would be last.
I mean, these last 2 weeks have been really good for Io. Put it that way. He needed a start,
and
like
that's
this.
a good story. It's like I said last week. I'm a huge Gunther fan, but I also, when an opportunity like this happens for someone else, you want to see them succeed or want to see how they do it or whatever. And I'm wondering what he is doing different. And Chris, being at all these Grand Prix, maybe you can see, well, only one with him, but what do you think that he's doing differently, other than, not being the same style as Gunther?
Yeah, because I sat down with him for the Wheel to Wheel show before the end of testing, so that we'd had it in the preview. And it's just a very methodical approach where Komatsu's clearly a very different character, but also was in a very different role previously, was factory based, and he has this very direct knowledge with the engineering team already and the race crew, whereas Gunther had to kind of oversee so much more the way his role was structured and the way he built the team himself. And if you look at the fact that you had, or you now have Haas saying they're going to bring in, I think it's a COO to work alongside Komatsu, it shows that they don't want him having to do everything that Gunther did. They want him to focus on what he's strong at. And I think there's a humility there that Komatsu knows he's having to prove himself, and he's putting in so much effort because they've been his peers, his colleagues that are around him, that he now needs to earn their respect as their leader. So he's like, right, I'm gonna leave no stone unturned, and I just think it's a refreshing change that they've respected and reacted well to, and yeah, it's created a really good atmosphere. I actually messaged Nico Hulkenberg's manager after the race, and he just got back to me saying it was a mega team effort and K-Mag's defense was 10 out of 10. Now, it's rare you hear one driver's manager praising another driver. Like, even in private, they love to just kind of talk up their own driver more than someone else, but doesn't say anything that Nico did well. He just says what the team's done, and it does show that they've got them working as a really good unit right now. Who knows? That could have been similar even with Gunther in place with a better car. Could have been. But I just think, as you say, that kind of like new boss bounce has paid off, and they're building on that.
I like that new boss.
Plus, Io's an engineer, and he speaks engineering to the team, which Gunther, I assume, couldn't do. And I go on endlessly about what a great job somebody like Zach Brown is doing, because he stays away from all that stuff. Maybe what was needed at Haas was somebody who does get more involved in it and knows the car as well as Io does.
I having just finished the book, Gunther's book, you do come away with the idea that he was flying here, flying there, flying everywhere. He was doing it all because he took it on as his own project, and it was his baby. And sometimes you can't see the trees for the forest. And I do think that the only way to extract that situation, he couldn't have suddenly brought in 3 different directors or different people underneath him, because that's not how Gunther works. So the only answer perhaps was, okay, we've been doing it your way, now we're going to do it a slightly different way. And I think that's probably down in the history books how we'll see this.
Yeah, maybe so.
That was also not the way Gene Haas works. That would have taken more investment that apparently Gene was unwilling to make. But speaking of team building, and I'm going to do a Medland pivot here, during this whole saga at Red Bull, we're hearing Christian Horner and Helmut Marko each referred to as the guy who built the Red Bull Formula One team.
Yeah.
Who really deserves that kudo? Chris, you got thoughts on that?
Good question.
It is a good question. I mean, well, certainly Dietrich Mateschitz. He's not here to take that credit now, but if you think of what that brand was, what Red Bull was, it's an energy drinks company. And even just the sponsorship deals they did were big news. But under him, that was a company that then decided, we could own and invest and run these things. We don't have to just be a sponsor. We can be the driving force behind it. And I think, it's partly a blank checkbook at the time, isn't it? But by getting Adrian Newey in, then that was a huge step forward. But that was also Newey following Coulthard, who was there, and Newey and Coulthard had been actually tight in their careers for a long time, and I think there's lots of little pieces that come together in that sense. So Matishic's vision, I think, was a big part. I think Marco, you've got to give huge credit, certainly for the driving perspective, what they've done with the junior team, but young drivers, giving them a chance, creating these huge popular athletes. I mean, obviously they uncovered Max, who is incredible, but also that was more jumping on an opportunity when it was there and showing the faith in him and putting him into a car at such a young age when no other team was willing to make that same offer, even though they all wanted to sign him. But then you look at someone like Daniel Ricciardo coming through their system. There's Sebastian Vettel. There's some incredible drivers that have come through. So that would be on Marco. But I think it would be wrong to overlook the importance of Horner in piecing it together, certainly from a race operations point of view, and keeping it together. I do think he's very much like a top level PR sort of manager. I think he's the forward facing one. He is, like you just kind of alluded to, Bob, your Zach Brown style. He is the CEO and team principal, right? But he's more the CEO.
Public face.
Yeah, and I feel like there are others below him that are more the team principal as such, in terms of the way they run the team, the race team, the way things happen. So, kind of, if you liken it to what Steiner was doing, it would be like if Steiner had given Komatsu the team principal role and he was the CEO. I think Horner kind of is doing everything. And it would be a big loss, I think, to that team if he went. There'd be a lot of people that need to fill certain positions. But I don't think you can ever, it's certainly such complex, I know it's a long-winded answer to this, but such complex organizations, you can't ever just say it's one person's done this job. So in that sense, disingenuous of Max to say Helmut built this up. He played a huge role, yes, but he couldn't have done
that. Was a political comment, I'm sure of it.
And Horner had built a very fine Formula 3000 team before he got chosen to head up Dietrich Mateschit's vision.
Absolutely. He was the youngest team principal at the time, by far. And, that was a brave call. But they'd seen something in him there at that age that he could take that on and be the right driving force, but also probably that he could be a long-term one if it worked. And that's exactly how it's proven. So,
and
but yeah, just following up with what Johnny said, absolutely, you're right that what Max said was a political comment.
And when
it seems, according to Marco today, that then the meeting he had with Mintzlaff went well and he's been promised everything he wanted. So we wonder what that actually proves to be. Which I'm sure we'll find out in a few days because, we haven't had a quiet day in Formula One for a long time.
Well, there's no question. I mean, you go back to Horner's time with Vettel and Webber, and obviously Vettel's 4 titles in a row. I mean, that had nothing to do with the Verstappens, and how much it had to do with Helmut Marko. Well, I don't think his influence on the team was as big as it is now politically. Horner, there's definitely something's gone wrong in the background with the Verstappens and the Horners, because there's definitely no love lost.
All right, guys, let's get a quick break in. And when we come back, we're going to talk about a little update from Andretti Global. You're listening to the Speed City. Back after these messages. All right, we're live on YouTube still, Facebook. Let's see. Woodsource says,
what we ought to do as a part of the show?
What's that?
And I don't care if everybody on YouTube hears it or not. Before we go off the air, like we do with our picks before the race, we ought to have each guy put the wildest story that he's heard about what's going on in Formula One right now. Toss it out there. And
I like that.
I like that.
Especially right now, it would be crazy wild.
Well, I also, Bob, said that what would be good for the show, generally speaking, and for John in terms of prep, is that we should all put opinion pieces in, and Chris could actually just put his opinion piece for the weekend, or whatever he's working on, because there's a lot of stuff out there that sometimes we have a dull race, and if you've got an opinion there that you've been holding back for, DRS, it's not working, whatever it might be.
I like that.
or is the one lap thing working? We laughed at it last week because there was nobody overtaking anybody.
Yeah.
So.
Hey, so speaking of talking about hey, Casey and I are both tech geeks. Jonathan is the Luddite, and Jonathan has come up with a solution for your remote microphone, Chris.
Yes.
He's actually found a piece of kit. It's in the UK.
It's called Jonathan Green holding a mic for you.
No, it's a gadget. And
no, in all seriousness,
seriously, we're going to send you the gadget. We're going to send you the link, and then we're going to confirm all this. We need to find out how much it costs for the airtime, as long as it's not some insane number.
But it works on XLR inputs and SIM cards.
All right, we're coming back. We'll talk more after the show.
Hi, this is Mario Andretti, and this is Speed City.
Welcome back to the fastest hour in radio, Speed City.
All right, welcome back to Speed City, our last segment on our post-race show for the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Very interesting race. Lots of things going on. Max Verstappen winning, Ollie Behrman in his inaugural race, finishing P7th. Pretty amazing
By the way,
stuff.
I never looked. How bad were Alpine today compared?
Yeah.
We kind of forgot about them, didn't we?
Well, Gasly didn't.
Yeah, Gasly didn't
finish,
Yeah, he didn't get started.
Yeah, and
Ocon
Esteban,
got 13th. He was a lap
13th,
down.
yeah.
But he did beat Tsunoda, Sargent, Ricardo, Bottas, and Joe. So
Sonoda was a disappointment for me.
He's had a shocker in the end.
Yeah. Verstappen, Sonoda had I thought, disappointing.
All right, I said we'd talk Andretti. Jonathan, you had this story. Was it you that had it in there, or was it Bob?
I think it was Bob.
Yeah, Bob. Talking about Andretti with their announcement of
the facility.
Headway.
Yeah.
Headway.
Yeah, I loved it, and it was talk about political commentary. They showed pictures of their building site in Indianapolis area, and they've made some changes, and they're proceeding with construction at pace, which happens to be the exact phrase they used when they were denied a position on the Formula One grid next year, and said we're going to keep pursuing our membership in the Formula One fraternity at pace, which I thought,
and also
that just jumps right off the page.
And also, it was carefully written to point out that the people who had designed said buildings were British and had just finished their work on the Aston Martin project. So, I mean, basically saying, we're using the same people that Aston Martin use, and therefore, I mean, pretty impressive.
Silverstone is already, acquired. I don't know if it's set up and ready to go, but
very impressive.
They are proceeding.
Yeah, this is a story on motorsport.com. If you want to look it up, the headline is Andretti sends signal to F1 with images of its future U.S. base. This is Adam Cooper doing the story. Andretti Global has sent a strong signal to the Formula One organization by revealing the first images of the U.S. headquarters.
It's definitely a signal for sure.
Yes, definitely a signal. And where is that? It's just outside Fishers, right? Just outside Indianapolis.
It is near the airport.
Yep. Yeah. Well,
speaking of wild stories, you see the one that Sebastian Vettel has, how should I put this, refused to deny that he misses Formula One and would consider a comeback.
With Mercedes?
Yeah, I think he was talking with Toto Wolff. He talks with everybody. Sebastian's a pretty chatty guy, but apparently there's still a connection there. His heart still speaks to driving a racing car. And he might consider coming back because he's made it clear in the past that he doesn't want to do anything else other than Formula One. So,
he's still young enough and capable enough. But
he's 36.
Yeah, but my gosh, those last two seasons were almost like, please go home. He wasn't in it, was he?
Well, in the Aston Martin, no.
Hey, let's pivot to the Audi story, Chris Medland. It wasn't long ago, we were talking about, is Audi even fully committed? Are they really going to do this? Do they have cold feet? And now we're hearing that they're all in.
Yeah, they announced it. They put out a press release to make it clear where they're headed. But also it's because I think there was some uncertainty about how they were going to approach the partnership with Sauber. So if you remember when it was announced, I think was it summer 22, Audi said they were coming in as a power unit supplier in 2026 and that they would announce their partner for that in due course. Then they said it would be Sauber and that would be their works team, but that was their partner. But what they then confirmed yesterday is that they're going to take over the Sauber group completely, 100% takeover from Audi. So there's no half measures here. This is when anyone says, why aren't Andretti buying a Formula One team? Well, there's not one for sale for starters, but the only one that is changing hands is because Audi has purchased Sauber and they already had a partnership agreed with them. And I would love to know the price. I don't actually have a figure on it. But if you think, I think it's $300 million that Andretti were looking to invest to take a majority shareholding in Sauber a number of years ago, and then found out they weren't going to have the autonomy they wanted, and that's why that deal fell through. Sauber essentially were taking the money for the investment, but still wanted to run it completely themselves from Switzerland. So that's why Andretti never bought it then. And also, this would have been, you don't go into a bidding war with Audi that was already had a deal going on. So this was not an option for Andretti. But it'll be, I think it's Oliver Hoffman, who is currently on the board at Audi, is going to become the chairman of the Sauber group. And he's going to head up Audi's kind of Formula One forward-facing corporate side. But then Andreas Seidel will be the F1 CEO for Audi, for what they just call the Audi F1 team. So, does
Sauber have any other interests
now
outside of Formula One? Any other sports car projects, etc.? Charios.
Say again, sorry.
Audi? Does Sauber have any other interests, whether it be Charios or a sports car project or anything else, asset-wise?
So they do a lot of kind of manufacturing and building and sim work. So essentially they're like a supplier to lots of other companies, but they don't have their own chassis as such that goes into sports cars. That would be if a sports car manufacturer needed a part making, they might well partner with Sauber to do it or get Sauber to make it. But they also do a lot that's not motorsport, if I recall correctly. So they're quite diverse in that sense. But no, from a motorsport point of view, it seems to be that they've only focused now on F1 for their own entity.
And Charouz was connected with Sauber, but it's gone, right?
Yeah, in Hinwil in Switzerland, it is. I suspect that the time it's taken Audi to get from where Chris left them off and the announcement that came this week was to negotiate the rest of that takeover. I think it was always Audi's intention to take over the whole thing, but they hadn't quite gotten the ink dry on what it was going to take to complete going from a majority shareholder to a single shareholder in the team, the Audi group. I mean, the Sauber group.
Jonathan, I was a bad host because there was another Andretti story that you had in there that we want to talk about General Motors. And your story was, are they still confident in Andretti?
Yeah, that was, the question mark being, is General Motors still there? And the answer
they
is
have
yes.
cold feet. Is anybody?
And the story basically saying that General Motors have not got cold feet and they are still committed to an Andretti project. And that's an important story, in what's going on at the moment and with, obviously the question mark being thrown out there, given that they haven't got the go-ahead. It's a long way to 2028, but are GM committed? And if they are, then that story about the facility, et cetera, all makes sense and give credence to effectively their partner being all in. And so therefore, that's why I put it in there, was to basically say, look, despite all that's gone on, the biggest motor company in the world, or one of them, is still heavily committed to Formula One. And that's important both to Formula One, to Ford, to the sport, to the auto industry, and obviously mainly important to Andretti's going forward on pace.
Yeah. Chris, sorry, buddy. I know that some of these stories you have on Racer, we should be showing those.
Unbelievable. I was thinking that with the Andretti
I know,
but then actually I looked because I thought that would be an IndyCar taken story rather than anywhere else, and I couldn't find it. So I'm going to have to do some digging to make sure we have that the HQ, because I got the press release, saw the pictures. Looks still a little bit McLaren-esque, isn't it?
Yes.
A little bit of balancing pond.
Very much so.
Definitely.
Well, let's go to racer.com and see what else is now.
There'll be nothing on there yet post race.
Yeah, come on, Chris.
We'll see when we get off.
You can't write for Racer and talk to us live on the radio at the same time.
Gosh,
it's really embarrassing.
Well, that'll be his first line in the story. It says, "Well, I was working with my colleagues at Speed City F1 this morning.
Exactly.
And a thought occurred to me."
I quite often, I obviously can't do it when I'm roaming the paddock post race. But right now, it was tempting to think, because some quotes have come in actually that I've seen. I'm like, I could try and write that, but if I do that, I'll lose my train of thought with you guys even more than I always do, and start speaking more gibberish that leads to one of my pivots that Bob's rightly pointed out. But I did want to flag, and I know this is a story we keep pivoting to, but if you want a further Red Bull-esque development, Christian Horner post-race has been very keen to point out that no individual is bigger than the team when discussing Max and Marco's future. And I think he's trying to push back a bit and say Max doesn't get to run the team by saying what he wants to happen or doesn't want to happen. Now, true, but at the same time, Christian's then saying the same thing for himself, isn't he? No individual's bigger than the team.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Back at you, buddy.
It's an interesting situation because the battle lines are drawn. The Verstappens have said they want him out, clearly, in reading between the lines. And
you don't have to read between Jos Verstappen's lines.
No, and Red Bull, at the moment anyway, is still backing Horner. So,
Well, I still say behind all this is a line that I'll never forget from Ross Brawn back in the day, trying to get the Honda to work before it became Brawn GP. And he was asked about drivers, who might you get? Who's the best? Yada, yada, yada. Braun said, "We're not worrying about drivers right now. We're worrying about creating the best car on the grid. If you have the best car, you don't need to worry about drivers because they're coming to you." And that's exactly the situation. True. Max Verstappen and his ilk, his posse on that side of the Horner issue has got to be thinking. I mean, does this issue matters so much to me that I would give up the best car on the grid and go somewhere else? I don't think so.
Toto Wolff actually gave a modern version of that just a couple of days ago by saying, he was asked whether he would be interested in Max Verstappen, and he kind of turned the question on its head by saying, look, yes, of course we'd be interested, but the best driver in the world will go where the best car is, and right now the best car is at Red Bull.
Every time.
So.
Yeah, he said something similar tonight, actually. He said he'd love to have him, and that there wouldn't be a team that wouldn't do handstands to have him. Mm-hmm. But his point of "I'd love to have him" is because Merca's so far off the pace right now that he'd love to be in a position that Max wants to go there. So I don't think it's as clear cut that that's where he'd end up if he does leave. But that's going to rumble on. That's going to be one that we're talking about for weeks and weeks. And hopefully, if the signs from Ferrari were pretty strong this weekend, that they can really challenge Red Bull at some races. It's going to be fun to watch when the pressure's put on Red Bull during a Grand Prix, isn't it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right, speaking of fun to watch, we got IndyCar tomorrow, the race. We got MotoGP back this weekend.
Yep, on TNT.
That's right. That was big news. Every single race live because NBC
somebody needs to explain this to me, but TNT Sports is BT Sports in the UK, but here in the States, it's connected to B&R or Bleacher Report, which is connected to Max.
Well, it's a whole big group. It's a whole group of. They got a whole ton.
Warner.
Of, Casey, do you know
Warner
all
Discovery?
Hey, Casey's going.
Warner Brothers Discovery.
Yeah, it's Warner Brothers.
Who
Discovery.
own CNN? Who own But so I'm trying to work out that you could therefore watch MotoGP on Max via Max.
Max Verstappen. Okay. All right, we're out of time, everybody.
No, not him again.
No, don't confuse it.
We're out of time. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Don't forget, Wheel to Wheel this week and next Sunday night. No, we got a week, but next Sunday night we'll be live in Austin. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you soon.
Have a trails.